Welcome to a fireside reading of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Chapter 45, Part 2. There was a profound silence. After a few moments of painful hesitation, I broke the silence. "Mrs. Strong," I said, "there is something within my knowledge which I have been earnestly entreated by Dr. Strong to conceal, and have concealed until tonight. But I believe the time has come when it would be mistaken faith and delicacy to conceal it any longer, and when your appeal absolves me from his injunction." She turned her face towards me for a moment, and I knew that I was right. I could not have resisted its entreaty if the assurance that it gave me had been less convincing. "Our future peace," she said, "may be in your hands. I trust it confidently to your not suppressing anything. I know beforehand that nothing you or anyone can tell me will show my husband's noble heart in any other light than one. Howsoever it may seem to you to touch me, disregard that. I will speak for myself before him and before God afterwards." Thus earnestly besought, I made no reference to the doctor for his permission, but without any other compromise of the truth than a little softening of the coarseness of Uriah Heep, related plainly what had passed in that same room that night. The staring of Mrs. Markleham during the whole narration, and the shrill, sharp interjections with which she occasionally interrupted it, defy description. When I had finished, Annie remained for some few moments silent, with her head bent down, as I have described. Then she took the doctor's hand — he was sitting in the same attitude as when we had entered the room — and pressed it to her breast and kissed it. Mr. Dick softly raised her, and she stood, when she began to speak, leaning on him and looking down upon her husband, from whom she never turned her eyes. "All that has ever been in my mind since I was married," she said in a low, submissive, tender voice, "I will lay bare before you. I could not live and have one reservation, knowing what I know now." "Nay, Annie," said the doctor mildly, "I have never doubted you, my child. There is no need. Indeed, there is no need, my dear." "There is great need," she answered in the same way, "that I should open my whole heart before the soul of generosity and truth, whom year by year and day by day I have loved and venerated more and more, as heaven knows."
"Really," interrupted Mrs. Markleham, "if I have any discretion at all—" "Which you haven't, you marplot," observed my aunt in an indignant whisper, "I must be permitted to observe that it cannot be requisite to enter into these details."
"No one but my husband can judge of that, mamma," said Annie, without removing her eyes from his face, "and he will hear me. If I say anything to give you pain, mamma, forgive me. I have borne pain first, often and long, myself."
"Upon my word!"
gasped Mrs. Markleham. "When I was very young," said Annie, "quite a little child, my first associations with knowledge of any kind were inseparable from a patient friend and teacher, the friend of my dead father, who was always dear to me. I can remember nothing that I know without remembering him. He stored my mind with its first treasures, and stamped his character upon them all. They never could have been, I think, as good as they have been to me if I had taken them from any other hands.
"Makes her mother nothing!"
exclaimed Mrs. Markleham. Not so, mamma, said Annie, but I make him what he was. I must do that. As I grew up, he occupied the same place still. I was proud of his interest, deeply, fondly, gratefully attached to him. I looked up to him, I can hardly describe how, as a father, as a guide, as one whose praise was different from all other praise, as one in whom I could have trusted and confided if I had doubted all the world. You know, mamma, how young and inexperienced I was when you presented him before me of a sudden as a lover.
"I have mentioned the fact 50 times at least to everybody here," said Mrs. Markleham. "Then hold your tongue for the Lord's sake and don't mention it any more," muttered my aunt.
It was so great a change, so great a loss, I felt it at first, said Annie, still preserving the same look and tone, that I was agitated and distressed. I was but a girl, and when so great a change came in the character in which I had so long looked up to him, I think I was sorry. But nothing could have made him what he used to be again, and I was proud that he should think me so worthy. And we were married.
"At St. Alphege, Canterbury," observed Mrs. Markleham. "Confound the woman," said my aunt. "She won't be quiet."
I never thought, proceeded Annie with a heightened colour, of any worldly gain that my husband would bring to me. My young heart had no room in its homage for any such poor reference. Mamma, forgive me when I say that it was you who first presented to my mind the thought that anyone could wrong me and wrong him by such a cruel suspicion.
"Me?"
cried Mrs. Markleham.
"Are you, to be sure," observed my aunt, "and you can't fan it away, my military friend."
It was the first unhappiness of my new life, said Annie. It was the first occasion of every unhappy moment I have known. These moments have been more of late than I can count, but not, my generous husband, not for the reason you suppose. For in my heart there is not a thought, a recollection, or a hope that any power could separate from you. She raised her eyes and clasped her hands, and looked as beautiful and true, I thought, as any spirit. The doctor looked on her henceforth as steadfastly as she on him. Mamma is blameless, she went on, of having ever urged you for herself, and she is blameless in intention every way, I am sure. But when I saw how many importunate claims were pressed upon you in my name, how you were traded on in my name, how generous you were, and how Mr. Wickfield, who had your welfare very much at heart, resented it, the first sense of my exposure to the mean suspicion that my tenderness was bought and sold to you, of all men on earth, fell upon me like unmerited disgrace, in which I forced you to participate. I cannot tell you what it was. Mamma cannot imagine what it was, to have this dread and trouble always on my mind. Yet know in my soul that on my marriage day I crowned the love and honor of my life.
"A specimen of the thanks one gets," cried Mrs. Markleham in tears, "for taking care of one's family. I wish I was a Turk." "I wish you were with all my heart, and in your native country," said my aunt.
It was at that time that Mamma was most solicitous about Cousin Malden. I had liked him. She spoke softly, but without any hesitation. Very much. We had been little lovers once. If circumstances had not happened otherwise, I might have come to persuade myself that I really loved him, and might have married him, and been most wretched. There can be no disparity in marriage like unsuitability of mind and purpose. I pondered on those words even while I was studiously attending to what followed, as if they had some particular interest or some strange application that I could not divine. There can be no disparity in marriage like unsuitability of mind and purpose. No disparity in marriage like unsuitability of mind and purpose. There is nothing, said Annie, that we have in common. I have long found that there is nothing. If I were thankful to my husband for no more, instead of for so much, I should be thankful to him for having saved me from the first mistaken impulse of my undisciplined heart. She stood quite still before the doctor, and spoke with an earnestness that thrilled me. Yet her voice was just as quiet as before. When he was waiting to be the object of your munificence, so freely bestowed for my sake, and when I was unhappy in the mercenary shape I was made to wear, I thought it would have become him better to have worked his own way on. I thought that if I had been he, I would have tried to do it at the cost of almost any hardship. But I thought no worse of him until the night of his departure for India. That night I knew he had a false and thankless heart. I saw a double meaning then in Mr. Wickfield's scrutiny of me. I perceived for the first time the dark suspicion that shadowed my life. Suspicion, Annie, said the doctor. No, no, no. In your mind there was none, I know, my husband, she returned. And when I came to you that night to lay down all my load of shame and grief, and knew that I had to tell that underneath your roof one of my own kindred, to whom you had been a benefactor for the love of me, had spoken to me words that should have found no utterance, even if I had been the weak and mercenary wretch he thought me. My mind revolted from the taint, the very tale conveyed. It died upon my lips, and from that hour till now has never passed them. Mrs. Markleham, with a short groan, leaned back in her easy chair and retired behind her fan as if she were never coming out any more. I have never, but in your presence, interchanged a word with him from that time. Then only when it has been necessary for the avoidance of this explanation. Years have passed since he knew from me what his situation here was. The kindness you have secretly done for his advancement, and then disclosed to me for my surprise and pleasure, have been, you will believe, but aggravations of the unhappiness and burden of my secret. She sunk down gently at the doctor's feet, though he did his utmost to prevent her, and said, looking up tearfully into his face, "Do not speak to me yet. Let me say a little more. Right or wrong, if this were to be done again, I think I should do just the same. You never can know what it was to be devoted to you with those old associations. To find that anyone could be so hard as to suppose that the truth of my heart was bartered away, and to be surrounded by appearances confirming that belief. I was very young and had no adviser, Between Mamma and me, in all relating to you, there was a wide division. If I shrunk into myself, hiding the disrespect I had undergone, it was because I honored you so much, and so much wished that you should honor me. Annie, my pure heart, said the doctor, my dear girl. A little more, a very few words more. I used to think there were so many whom you might have married, who would not have brought such charge and trouble on you, and who would have made your home a worthier home. I used to be afraid that I had better have remained your pupil and almost your child. I used to fear that I was so unsuited to your learning and wisdom. If all this made me shrink within myself, as indeed it did, when I had that to tell, it was still because I honored you so much and hoped that you might one day honor me. That day has shone this long time, Annie, said the doctor, and can have but one long night, my dear. Another word. I afterwards steadfastly meant, and proposed to myself, to bear the whole weight of knowing the unworthiness of one to whom you had been so good. And now, a last word, dearest and best of friends. The cause of the late change in you, which I have seen with so much pain and sorrow, and have sometimes referred to my old apprehension, at other times to lingering suppositions nearer to the truth, has been made clear tonight, and by an accident I have also come to know tonight the full measure of your noble trust in me, even under that mistake. I do not hope that any love and duty I may render in return will ever make me worthy of your priceless confidence. But with all this knowledge fresh upon me, I can lift my eyes to this dear face, revered as a father's, loved as a husband, sacred to me in my childhood as a friend's, and solemnly declare that in my lightest thought I have never wronged you, never wavered in the love and the fidelity I owe you. She had her arms around the doctor's neck, and he leant his head down over her, mingling his grey hair with her dark brown tresses. Oh, hold me to your heart, my husband. Never cast me out. Do not think or speak of disparity between us, for there is none, except in all my many imperfections. Every succeeding year I have known this better, as I have esteemed you more and more. Oh, take me to your heart, my husband, for my love was founded on a rock, and it endures. In the silence that ensued, my aunt walked gravely up to Mr. Dick, without at all hurrying herself, and gave him a hug and a sounding kiss. And it was very fortunate, with a view to his credit, that she did so, for I am confident that I detected him at that moment in the act of making preparations to stand on one leg as an appropriate expression of delight. You are a very remarkable man, Dick, said my aunt, with an air of unqualified approbation, and never pretend to be anything else, for I know better. With that, my aunt pulled him by the sleeve and nodded to me, and we three stole quietly out of the room and came away. That's a settler for our military friend, at any rate, said my aunt on the way home. I should sleep the better for that, if there was nothing else to be glad of. She was quite overcome, I'm afraid, said Mr. Dick with great commiseration. What?
Did you ever see a crocodile overcome? Inquired my aunt. I don't think I ever saw a crocodile, returned Mr. Dick mildly. There never would have been anything the matter if it hadn't been for that old animal, said my aunt with strong emphasis. It's very much to be wished that some mothers would leave their daughters alone after marriage and not be so violently affectionate. They seem to think the only return that can be made them for bringing an unfortunate young woman into the world, God bless my soul, as if she asked to be brought or wanted to come, is full liberty to worry her out of it again. What are you thinking of, Trot? I was thinking of all that had been said. My mind was still running on some of the expressions used. There can be no disparity in marriage like unsuitability of mind and purpose. The first mistaken impulse of an undisciplined heart. My love was founded on a rock. But we were at home, and the trodden leaves were lying underfoot, and the autumn wind was blowing. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I look forward to seeing you very much tomorrow at the same time and place, 5 Pacific, live at Fireside Reading on Instagram. And all the chapters uploaded to the YouTube channel, Fireside Reading, pretty quickly thereafter. Until I see you all again, please stay very well. Good night.